Every single time I tell this story, I can in fact picture that moment like it was yesterday. And for a split second, when I picture that moment, it still feels just as genuine. He sat there and he looked at me in the eyes and he said, "Carly, I am so proud of you." The only thing that I had ever wanted to hear growing up is that my parents were proud of me. And now he said it. It didn't matter anymore who was proud of me or what they were proud of me for. Somebody was finally proud of me. I was gonna do whatever it took to hear that over and over and over again. And this person was trafficking me. So my name's Carly. I grew up in a really small town in northeastern Ontario. I grew up with both my parents, and I was the youngest of 3 kids. My family from the outside seemed quite normal. I didn't feel the same way as maybe it was portrayed to the outside world. You know, I didn't have that mom who, when I came home from school, asked me how my day was. I didn't have that mom who, when I had a tough day at school or I was struggling with something in my life, she didn't seem to notice and she didn't ask me about it. And then as for my dad was always working more than 2 jobs usually, and he did that to put a roof over our heads and food in our stomach. I don't really have many memories with him, just him and I. I even struggled with connecting with my siblings. So really growing up, my issue was I always felt I didn't belong. I never felt good enough and I really felt unlovable. Growing up, I did experience some sexual violence, and when that happened to me, I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't want to tell my friends because I didn't want them to think that it was my fault or that I asked for it, and I didn't want to tell my family because I didn't feel like they would believe me or that I just wasn't comfortable having those conversations with them, and I had no other outside support. So already being a sensitive kid, I started to act out. I remember having a permanent desk in the hallway. I remember not even being allowed in a classroom and having to do all my work in a library. During high school, there was points where I just didn't go. And this, as a kid, was my way of asking for help because I didn't know how. And the hardest part for me was that nobody noticed. And instead of somebody asking those questions, I was punished for the behaviors. Despite it being a small town, drugs were pretty easily accessible. So I very quickly found drugs and they became my saving grace. I would say I was a full-blown drug addict by the time I was 16. My drug use increased significantly, and I realized in order for me to get my drug of choice, I had to do things that became even more traumatic and more painful. So I actually started doing what we would call circumstantial sex work or survival sex work. I engaged in some form of exchange, whether that was sex for drugs, sex for a place to stay, or sex for money. I went to this detox center, and within 3 days of being there, I got kicked out. Another girl got kicked out at the exact same time as me, and she pretty much said to me, "I know this place we can go. There'll be people there that'll take care of us. There'll be drugs. They'll let us sleep there. You know, will you come with me?" And of course I said, "Yeah, I'll come." So we walk into this trap house, and right away, I knew what I needed to do to survive in this place. So drug dealers came and went, and I exchanged sex for my drug of choice. And that went on for a couple days. And then all of a sudden, these 2 guys came. Hadn't seen them for the 2 days that I had been there. I remember when they came in, it was like, instantly I was like, they're different. And one of them actually came over to me immediately, and he sat down beside me, and he said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "You're too beautiful to be here." He had me at that. It had been a long time since, 1, somebody noticed me, and 2, somebody told me that I was beautiful. I started to talk to him, and he asked me a million questions. And not once did it feel like I was being interviewed, and not once did it feel like I was being interrogated. It felt incredibly, incredibly special. That for once somebody stopped and noticed me and came over and talked to me, and that for once somebody stopped and noticed I was struggling and asked me about it. He asked me questions that I had hoped somebody had asked me from the time I was a little girl. So not only did he ask me about my life and my family and why I was in this place and about my struggles and even my hopes and dreams for the future, he asked me a really crucial question. And I remember it like it was yesterday. He said, "What happened to you in your past that causes you to use drugs today?" And it seems like such a simple question, but nobody asked me that from the time I was a little kid, when I was acting out in school, when I was anxious all the time. Nobody asked me that question. So when he asked me, it blew my mind. And my trafficker was the first person I ever disclosed my sexual abuse to. And he did not react in the way that I was so fearful somebody would react. He was compassionate, he was empathetic, he was caring, he asked appropriate questions, he related to me, and he just listened. Really what he was doing at this point was gathering information that he was later going to use against me. But in that moment, it felt so good. That exact same night I met him, he offered me a safe place to stay, and I took him up on it. He got me out of that apartment. He drove me to a hotel. On the way there, he bought me food. When we got to the hotel, he gave me a key card to that hotel. I got to have a shower with a door locked. I got to change into clean clothes. I got to go to bed that night with a door locked, so I didn't have to sleep with one eye open, thinking somebody might do something to me. The next morning, he took me shopping. He bought me clothes. He showered me with compliments. He boosted my self-esteem and he boosted my self-worth. He told me I was going to be a part of his crew. I was going to ride with him. He gave me that sense of belonging, that sense of family, that being a part of something that I craved so badly. He also told me that he would never let anybody hurt me in the way that I have told him people had hurt me, that he would keep me safe, that he would protect me. And the other thing he did is he provided my drug of choice. Because he took the time to get to know every little detail about my life and every little thing that I felt was lacking in my life and then give it to me, this felt as if this was the best my life had ever been. There was little to no red flags. The only red flag was that it was too good to be true, and who would want to believe that this was too good to be true if nobody had ever treated you that way before? Things all of a sudden started to shift. It happened pretty quickly and it was quite blunt. All of a sudden he was giving me all that love and attention, and then he just pulled it all away. This is when they really brought up the idea of working in the sex trade, and they did so in a very direct way. I remember he sat down with me in the hotel room and he had like a serious conversation with me. He told me that all the things he had done for me, the hotel I'd been staying in, the clothes he bought me, the food he's been buying me, and the drugs he'd given me, it cost a lot of money. He said, you can dance or you can escort. And it was really smart on his part to lay it out as almost a choice, because for me, I felt as if I was choosing. I felt as if I consented to it. So when he laid out the options, I chose escorting. I thought I'd have a sense of control. I thought I would control what services I would provide. I thought I would control how many people I would have sex with a day. I thought I would control how much money I would charge. But as soon as I chose escorting, all of that changed. They took complete control. So they took my photos, they posted my ad online, they put their cell phone number on that ad, they arranged the dates, they decided how many people I would have sex with a day, they decided what services I would provide, and they decided how much money I would charge. Half the time, I had no idea who was coming to my hotel room door, and I had no idea what service I was expected to provide. I hated every minute of it. It was the most traumatic and horrific experience of my life, but as crazy as it sounds, my life was still better than before I had met them. I had a roof over my head, I had food in my stomach, I wasn't freezing cold in the streets withdrawing all by myself. I have 3 reasons why I didn't leave, and I think after working with young people in similar situations for quite a few years now, these are the 3 reasons why it's not as simple as just walking out that door. And the first reason is the most obvious. I knew what they were capable of, and if I walk out this hotel room door and they catch me, what are they gonna do to me? That fear was real. But more so than that, if I walk out this door, where am I gonna go? Where am I gonna get my next meal? Where am I gonna sleep tonight? Where am I gonna get my next fix? And who is ever gonna love me again after this? That was much scarier than they were. And the strongest reason that I didn't leave was the psychological hold that they had on me, that trauma bond. It was unbelievable. They met me at a time in my life where I had given up. I had given up on myself, and I had given up on any goals at that point. I was completely hopeless when they met me. I was pretty much just waiting to die. And they picked me up, and they dusted me off and they built me back up, and they made me feel incredibly loved and special. And they met every single one of my basic needs, and they were there for me when everybody else gave up on me. The way I was helped is actually I was helped by an undercover police officer. I opened the hotel room door. He was in plain clothing, so already less threatening, showed his badge, and the first things that came out of his mouth were, "You are not in any trouble. I am just here to make sure that you're okay, and if you need anything." So I invited him in. I thought I better be really polite. I better be really well spoken. My traffickers had said to me, like, what I'm doing is wrong, that if you get caught, you're gonna go to jail. They asked to see my ID. I was over the age of 18 at this point, but he pretty much did everything that my trafficker did that first day that he met me. He sat down on that other bed and he just talked to me. He talked to me like he would his sister or his daughter. He spoke to me like I was a human being. And he asked me a million questions. He asked me about my life. He asked me about my friends. He asked me about my family. He asked me about my hopes and dreams for the future. And again, the most important question of all is he asked me what caused me to use drugs, because I did disclose that I was an addict. And he asked that question. First thing he asked when he found out that I used drugs was, what happened to you? Why do you use drugs? Why do you feel like you need to use drugs? Did something go on in your life? Again, he was gathering information from me at that point, but not to use against me later, but to help me. Obviously, I didn't tell him I was being trafficked. My traffickers told me what to say if a police officer came in, so I told him I'm an independent sex worker. Nobody's making me do anything I don't want to do. I keep all my money. So because I was over the age of 18, and because I didn't disclose anything was happening to me, that detective left. But before he did so, he did something that was really important. So before he left, he asked for a scrap piece of paper from my purse, and he wrote his first name and his cell phone number on it. And he didn't hand it to me and say, you know, when you wake up, little girl, and realize you're in trouble or you're being trafficked, give me a call. He handed it to me and he said, if you ever need anything, you can text me or call me. If it's in the middle of the night and you're just lonely and you need to talk to somebody, you can call me. If you haven't eaten all day, call me and I'll get you something to eat. So what that told me is he actually cared more about my safety and my well-being than he did about catching the bad guy, because he knew I was being trafficked. The red flags were very apparent. They continued to investigate because of those red flags. Eventually what happened is they found out there was another hotel room in the same name. It was not my name. They went to the other hotel room and it just happened that there was two men there. They were my traffickers. Those two individuals were arrested. And when he told me that, I was not relieved, because he just took away the only two people that were supporting me. I got extremely upset. I believe I was yelling, I was crying, I was hysterical at one point. I didn't know what to do. They brought me to the hospital, which to me again means they cared about my well-being, they cared about my safety. Once I was at the hospital, they had victim services meet me there. So that same night after I left the hospital, they got me a safe place to stay. The next morning, my victim services worker met me at that safe place. She brought me a cell phone that worked so I could reach out to my family and my new supports and to really build a support network. She introduced me to loving, supportive, caring people that started to boost my self-esteem and boost my self-worth. Again, that same day she was there, she walked me over to the financial assistance office. They helped get me a check so I had money, so I didn't feel as if I needed to go back to something exploitive in order to meet my needs. They helped me apply for a drug treatment center. Once I got into that treatment center, they drove me there. They made sure I arrived safely. They gave me their cell phone numbers to call while I was in that treatment center, so that when I was having a bad day or when it was just call time and I had nobody to call, I'd have somebody to talk to. And every time I did call, they answered the phone. Once I finished that treatment center, they helped me find a sober living house. That sober living house was for 1 year. I stayed the entire year while they stayed connected with me, continued to connect me with resources from therapy to counselors to different programs and groups. And then once that sober living house finished after a year, they actually helped me find a second stage housing that was specific to people who had experienced a trafficking situation. And then from there, they helped me find my very first job. And my very first job was as a peer support worker working with individuals who had also been trafficked. It didn't matter if I was doing well or if I was not doing well. They were there with those supports unconditionally. This is the way that it needs to be done. Those wraparound services need to be accessible, and somebody's needs have to be met in order for them to successfully exit. I always say it's fundamentally unfair to ask somebody to leave their trafficker if you have not found alternative ways to meet every single one of their basic needs. If you cannot do that, they will go back. And when they go back, it's going to be 10 times worse. I truly believe that movies and media portray human trafficking to look one way, and it looks completely different than that. And I don't think people realize the magnitude of the trafficking that's going on in your communities. There's actually a stat out there from the Canadian Women's Foundation that says 93% of all trafficking that occurs in Canada is domestic sex trafficking, which means it's happening to Canadian-born citizens. It doesn't matter who you are or where you come from, how successful you are in life, everybody has vulnerabilities. I didn't choose to have low self-esteem growing up. I didn't choose to be born a girl. I didn't choose to experience previous abuse growing up. I didn't choose to have little social supports in my community. These were not my fault. So it's incredibly important today to own your vulnerabilities, know what your vulnerabilities are, voice your vulnerabilities. I still have the same vulnerabilities I had growing up. The difference is today I know what they are, I own them, they're my vulnerabilities, so nobody's ever gonna be able to use them against me again.